In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create this Lightroom preset that I've named Dark Day. This is inspired by the new Batman movie, so I wanted to create something that was very similar to the colors and the tones that they're using in the film, and I've come up with this. So you can see on the left is the before and on the right is the after, and there's not actually a lot of color involved. We're creating this preset. It's more about manipulation and using the color blue. So you can see that in the highlights and in the shadows there's bits of blue. So I'm going to walk you through this and show you how to do it. So I'm just going to hit the reset button and make a start. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is actually bring the exposure down. Now, depending on your image will determine how dark you need to go. With this particular image, I think about a stop is probably more than enough. You could go 2 stops or maybe even 2.5 stops, but that's entirely up to you. Okay, I'm going to bring the highlights down just a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to bring the shadows right up because we did bring that exposure down. I just want to bring detail back out in them darker areas. And I'm going to bring the whites and the blacks up quite a bit as well because of what we just done. So I'm going to bring the whites up to around plus 50, and I'm going to bring the blacks probably around the same, maybe a little bit more around there. That's pretty good. So let's come back up to the color temperature, because now I've done that, I can kind of get an idea of how the whole image looks with regards to tones. So I'm just going to bring this color temperature down a little bit just to start adding that little bit of blue, and I'm going to bring the tint down to around minus 34, 35. So that gives us quite a nice base to start with. We'll be doing most of the color manipulation within Tone Curve and the HSL panel, as well as the color grading, obviously. So let's come to the texture and just bring that down just a little bit there, and let's bring the clarity down to around minus 30 and dehaze about minus 8 around there. So we're just knocking most of the levels down there. And let's do the same with the vibrance and saturation. So vibrance around minus 20, 22, that looks good. Saturation, just bring that down minus 10. And again, depending on how dark you want your image to be, you can continue dropping that saturation and you'll get a much darker image overall. Okay, so let's come to the tone curve, and what I'm going to do is manipulate this quite a lot. So I'm going to bring the whites down. So what we're doing is we're darkening them whites, and you can see that I'm just pulling them to the right hand side of this box. So it's around there. That looks pretty good. And then let's come to the grays here, and let's just isolate them a little bit, push them up a little bit, and then come down to the blacks. And let's just drop these ever so slightly. So we're getting a bit of a weird kind of S curve going on. I'm just going to push these up a little bit and just bring this down. That's it. So it's quite a steep S there, you can see, and that gives us a really nice dark effect. You can see what that's done. It's given us almost like a gloss look. Now you can matte the blacks off if you want to as well, just by pulling up the bottom of the blacks a little bit, and that will just matte the blacks off and make it look a little bit more cinematic as well. So that looks good. Now what I want to do is copy this to the red, green and blue channels. So to do that, we just right click, copy channel settings, and then literally just paste them. So come to the red and right click and then select paste channel settings. So you just do that on all 3. So you just need to paste it now, that's all. Right click, paste. There we go. So what that's done, that's given us that same curve, the exact same curve adjustment there on all 4 of them adjustments. And you can see that the tone curve, as I always say, has a massive impact on your images, and it's a great tool to create contrast with. Okay, so let's continue then to the colors now, so we can really start manipulating these colors even more and really take control of this image and get what we want. So let's start in the hues. So the reds, I'm going to push them all the way up to 100. I'm going to push the orange just up to around there. There's not actually a lot of orange in there, maybe some in here. Yellows, I'm going to take the yellows right down to around there. So it's about minus 55. I think that looks pretty good. And then the aqua and blue, I'm going to just drop them a little bit. So the aqua, drop that down to minus 20. And then the blue, sorry, that was blue. Aqua minus 20. There we go. And then blue just a little bit more. I think I set it to around 42, 40, around that section there. That's quite nice. So we're changing the hue of the colours. So we're literally changing them. And magenta, let's just bring that all the way out. Okay, let's go to the saturation, and let's drop the saturation of the red to about there, about minus 48, 45. Again, these numbers will vary, but if you stick with these numbers, around these numbers, you'll get a good starting point. So the orange, I'm going to go up to plus 34 for this image, and the yellow around about the same, maybe a little bit less, 30. That looks good. And then let's jump to the aqua. Let's drop that to 38, 40. Around there's good. Blue, I'm going to drop that down there. And then purple, let's just drop that right down as well there. Okay, that's looking pretty good for the saturation. So we're just taking out them really strong colours there. Okay, let's go to the brightness then, to the luminance. And again, we're going to be dropping this because we are creating a very, very dark image. So let's drop this down to 46, 45. Let's just take a little bit of orange out, not too much. And let's just bring this yellow up. That looks good. 57, 58, that looks good. And then let's just drop this aqua down a little bit to about minus 30. So if we look at what we've just done there, there's a bird's eye view of the whole thing. You can see that we're making the reds as orange as possible, and we're bringing them yellows down into that orange spectrum, and then the greens down, the aqua and the blue and the magenta down, just to really pull down all them primary colors. And if you look at the saturation as well, we're really pulling them down. You can see that they're almost following suit. Can you see there? So they're staggered. And then the luminance, we're just playing a little bit with some of the colors just to brighten up certain parts. Now if we look at the before and after just from the HSL panel, by clicking on this, you can see that we created a really, really nice look. Now there is some blue in there, but the majority of the color that is in there is actually, if you look, it's actually the yellow. And you can see that here, all the way around the top here. So that yellow gives it a really cinematic look. But what we want to do now is, within the color grading, is start adding a little bit of blue, because within movies, the majority of the time of when they color grade the images, they have the opposite colors. So they have blue and they have yellow, or they have a blue and a slight yellow orange. That's what gives it that cinematic look. So we've already created that within the HSL panel. We now just need to add the blue back into the image to give us a real cinematic, dramatic look. Okay, so we're going to do that within the shadow section. So if you come to the color grade, and if yours looks like this, you can either select shadows by clicking on the name, or go up to the top here and you'll see the different ones, and you can then select them individually. So let's select the shadows, and I'm going to use the hue of 244. That's what I usually go for, 244, which is there. So really, really nice dark deep blue. And then let's just bring the saturation up. So I'm going to have a saturation of only about 15. We only need a little bit of it in. We don't want it to be too overbearing. So there we go. That looks pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is change the blending. So if we bring the blending down, that kind of takes it away. Let's push this up. You can see what that does. It's only a small adjustment, but if you look here, what you'll see is the yellow kind of being taken away. So we're adding that blue into the image there a lot more. So it gives us a really, really nice deep blue color to our shadows, which is exactly what we want, and we still keep yellow within some of them highlights there. So we can come back and add more if we want to up here. So that looks pretty good. Now, obviously, we've done quite a bit with the color, so we're going to need to introduce a little bit of noise reduction. So let's just bring the luminance up to around, I think about 25, and then color, I think probably around 30, just to make sure that we're not getting noise back into any of the darker areas there. So that looks pretty good. Now we can come back up to the top here and look at this exposure. We could darken that a little bit more if we want to, or lighten it a little bit more. Really comes down to your image. I think we could probably go just a little bit lower. There we go. So the other thing that I want to do is I want to target this sky, because it's a beautiful sky, but I think we could just punch that up a little bit. So let's come to the top here and let's use Lightroom's select sky feature, and it will probably run off into side of the building there, which it has, simply because that's a reflection, but that's fine because that is the sky within there, so I would keep that definitely. So let's take the show overlay off. We don't want that, and let's just drop that exposure a little bit. Now you can see what's happening there. That's actually starting to mat it off a little bit, so it needs to be really minuscule. So it's 0.05. Let's add some contrast to it, and I think we could probably push that up a little bit more. There we go. And then the highlights, I think I'm going to bring them right down. Now what I always do whenever I'm doing the sky, it's a habit of mine, is I always push it to the extreme. So I'll always sort of do that. And what that kind of does, for me anyway, it gets my eyes kind of calibrated, so I know that's the darkest, that's the lightest, and then I can really decide where is best. So I kind of like to do a bit of back and forth, just so I can get a better idea of where it sits. So I think there, that's good. And let's do the same with the shadows. So you can see the shadows there is just affecting that side of the building down here. So let's just bring that up a little bit. And then the whites, I think we could just push that up a little bit, you know. I don't mind that there is slight overexposing there. So let's just push that white up a little bit. And let's just bring them blacks down. There we go. So that looks pretty good. And I think we could just add a little bit of contrast to the image as well. So let's just bring that up to plus 20. Yep, about there. Okay. Now, to finish it off, I just want to target that area there. So let's just create a new mask, create a radial, and let's just click and drag in there. Let's just make sure we're hitting the top of the dome there. That looks pretty good, and also it's a soft selection, it's not hard, so you just push it all the way in so it's soft and feathered. Take the overlay off and just bring the exposure up just a little bit to around there. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to right click and duplicate that, and I'm going to move that one across, and I'm going to make this one really small. I'm just going to bring the overlay back so I can see what I'm doing. And yes, I could have done this with a brush, probably would have been a lot quicker, but it just means that I'm keeping the same exposure, and yeah, there's more than one ways to skin a cat, so there you go. So that's given us some nice lines along there now, and that's how I done it. That is pretty much it. So if we press the Y key, you'll see the before and after. You can see that it gives us that kind of Batman look, which is really cool. It's quite moody, quite dramatic, and yeah, so you can get some really cool images with doing this preset. So have a go on your own images. I look forward to seeing them. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.